believe it? It's another Inside Media Weekly. Just so you know, It's a Wonderful Life was released in 1946. Oh, we're talking pre-show. Coming out in 4K. I don't know how much of a 4K scan you're going to get out of a film that's 60 years old, 70 years old. It's an unbelievable episode with the unbelievable Kevin Bastos. The unforgettable Justin Pinto. We're flipping back. Yeah.
I think we'll be Ryan Boni and the Pintones
because
from now on. Okay. I like it.
So, get the water bottle off there.
It's lunchtime.
And guess what? It's the Condors.
Wait, what?
Condor cam.
What happened?
They're not doing it.
There's actually animals in this shot.
They're not doing anything.
What happened to the...
There's still sea otters.
Sometimes you gotta change it up.
We can go check it on the sea otters. I was just thinking, if you're gonna put a camera on the Condors, shouldn't it be facing the condor? I mean, there's the side of it.
Condors can turn,
I guess, but they're not going to turn to the camera.
How do you know that?
This is the San Diego Zoo, by the way. We can go flip back real quick to the Monterey to make sure. And there's the empty tank. They are playing Dungeons and Dragons again, though. This is exciting to see. I can't see what the number is, but yeah, there was one floating around. Well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say floating around because that would sound. They're swimming on their back. Oh, there's one caught up in the corner, and he's gone, or she's gone.
Something floating in the bottom.
There's something. There's one swimming around down there.
Planty things.
I think one day we're gonna have to do an Inside Media Weekly on the road,
remote
Monterey
shoot.
Bay.
Is it in the budget?
And maybe, and then we'll perform in front of the actual sea otters, because I have a feeling we're probably one of the few shows on the interwebs that highlights these Monterey Bay sea otters.
Blue screen it.
Oh yeah, that would save.
Might be
money.
cheaper.
Yeah, okay.
Might be cheaper.
So we have a sad edition of Inside Media Weekly. Sorry, I know it was going to be happy and exciting.
It's okay.
Stan Lee passed away as we're taping this on Tuesday. Passed away yesterday at the age of 95. Of course, he was the publisher at Marvel for many, many years. Lots more people probably know him recently from his cameos in all the Marvel movies. And I'm going to list in a minute here, like all of the
list them
characters that he helped to create or co-create.
Okay.
But I wanted, some thoughts. Obviously, his wife had passed away last year. He had a lot of health issues at the beginning of the year. He was in the hospital in February, I think, with pneumonia. And unfortunately, he's been in the news because his business manager has been trying to rip him off, allegedly. So, Stan Lee, his impact on comics, on movies, entertainment, media, your thoughts?
Wow. You want to start?
A small question.
Well, I know you've read more of the stuff that he actually had a hand in making.
Probably.
Yeah, like I haven't read many 60s into the 70s of comics, really. But I mean, you can't, how many of the biggest movies of the last 10 years
grew from him?
Grew from, the ideas of Marvel from those early days, and who would have thought that, $2 billion at the box office and all those different things and so on and so forth. I've never been I like Marvel movies. I'm not a big Marvel comic fan. I like DC comics more, and they make bad movies most of the time. So there's that. But yeah, it just, him and Kirby and Ditko back in the day, and all the ideas that came from them and what they started. Really, it was unbelievable. 60 years later.
Still going. Stronger
than ever in some ways.
Yeah, people always forget he was actually around before the Marvel Comics was Marvel Comics. When
we
it was
started at the
timely.
one before it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you're 17.
Yeah, like a kid.
Yeah.
17 until 95, still involved in this industry. And just that, serious tip of the cap, almost 80 years in one industry, and something that's playful, something that's not of depth. I think neatest things about him you could say, I was the creator of all this stuff. And he was, and he wasn't at the same time. It's sort of like your boss coming in and throwing ideas and taking the credit for that. A lot of that needs to go to the other guys in the industry who worked under him. And without dredging up all of it, there was a lot of controversy before, way back with ownership. At the forefront, though, he was the maker of this industry, pushed it as the PR guy. It's not the same kind of parallel, but he was like a Jerry Jones, who the ownership was bigger than the franchise itself for a long period of time. And even in that doldrums, not heyday, like 60s, 70s, 80s, and that fall down, and then the rebirth, and then the death again, and then the rebirth again, and then the reinvention of itself as an industry. And all through that, kept trying to create. I look back the other day, what is his earliest cameo? And it was like in some television Hulk movie. And they showed him, again, looking old at the time, but he's probably, mid-50s, early 60s at the time, 30, 40 years ago, appearing in this stuff. And to put himself on the soapbox way back when and say, stay on soapbox, be involved in all of that. But just the fact that his name really was synonymous with the industry and those iconic characters, and flip that over and tell me who those are, tell me who's behind all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and obviously he had a hand in co-creating or creating or overseeing hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of characters, not the least of which Spider-Man, the Hulk, Doctor Strange, the Fantastic Four, Daredevil, Black Panther, X-Men, Ant-Man, Iron Man, Thor, and Groot. Can't forget Groot.
Very important.
Not the rest of the Guardians, but he was, I guess, helped develop Groot as his own character prior to. But, we're talking some of the longest-lasting names in the fictional characters of all time here.
So much of that, just that whole time, like even, like you said, with Ditko, for example, him creating and working with Steve Ditko. You got to give a tip of the cap to him. But Ditko creating that pantheon of Spider-Man villains, which are pretty impressive as a whole, obscure ones to more known ones, Vulture and Green Goblin and Mysterio and all of those characters in that initial Spider-Man phase that were still around today, to be stuck around there. That's pretty impressive. Pretty cool dude.
Yeah.
Pretty cool dude.
And I know, for me personally, my introduction, I was never a big comic reader, but just, of course, as a little kid, became obsessed with Star Wars. And then, but at the same time, we had Spider-Man on Electric Company and the first Superman movie. Both made me go, wait, there's some other cool stuff too that is interesting and otherworldly of these characters. And so obviously, Mr. Lee had a big part in bringing that, because I wasn't really aware of the early Batman or obviously even the Superman TV shows way back as far as Superman goes. So so he's going to be I think sorely missed. Supposedly he already recorded his cameo for Avengers 4 prior to his death. But yeah, like you were talking, I was watching. Of course, quite a few compilations have come out of all of his cameos now on the internet. My computer is showing black now. It was interesting to see some of the early ones that are TV specials and things like that. And just to see how far Marvel, especially, has come in the entertainment industry beyond the comics, from kind of producing these kind of low budget things to obviously being the behemoth that they are currently.
Well, I liked that he was involved in a lot of stuff. Like, I was even starting now to watch The Gifted show. Have you watched any of this? On Fox.
The new,
the X-Men TV show.
Yeah, recent.
Yeah, and he's a cameo in that one as well.
He's everywhere.
It's not a big deal to have him show up for a day, see how things are going. Hey, we got this, quick 3-shot thing or one quick sequence of what's going on. But my wife actually said to me last night, I know you said the Avengers 4 is already recorded, but there are a lot of Marvel movies that are in the can already. The Dark Phoenix, X-Men, the New Mutants one. Did he make cameos in those? Has he appeared in those? Where will be the last place he shows up somewhere? Mm-hmm. And then what kind of homage are they going to put to him? So, kind of cool.
So how do you go from a sad story? Let's go to a slightly happier story. The Grinch.
I gotta say, Boni.
Opened $67 million opening weekend. I actually, it's interesting, movies number 1 and 2 this past weekend. I saw this weekend. Both of them finally getting a hold of watching some of these movies. Overlord just barely eked out Nutcracker movie for third place. Star is Born, of course, still doing very, very well. And then The Girl in a Spider's Web, a new dragon tattoo story, not do so well. 7.8 million.
A little thrilled about that. Let me go there first.
You want to see the end of dragon tattoo stories?
No.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, yes and no.
Okay.
That is. I don't know if you know, the author of these wrote 3 books and published them, and they got popular after he died. And there was a 4th one that was supposedly finished, and it's not widow because it's his girlfriend at the time of his death had those. Now, the yucky part of this is his family, who he was away from, like in every sense in a way, got all the royalties, and his girlfriend, with whom he'd spent all this time, got nothing. And so there's a back and forth battle between the estate and the girlfriend, who has this 4th book, about whether or not it's going to be released or come out. And the estate said, heck with you, we'll get somebody else to ghostwrite this 4th story, which is the Spider's Web story. And, it made money, but not the same. I'm kind of happy that this sort of stuck it to those group of individuals and said, you know what? We're not big fans of this. Mm-hmm. The novels are very good. And the movie was pretty good. Didn't make much money. But I'm glad that they went to this other thing in the can to make more money, and it turned out to be a failure. That kind of makes me happy.
Well, they probably made their money.
Oh.
It's just kind of ruining the studio. Poor Sony.
Oh, yeah.
Sony's losing the money, I think.
Right.
They got their check already, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
But it also would stop any
Future
right. things that would happen. But it made it less than 8 million, and I think internationally they said it made about 8 million. And this is almost a $50 million budgeted movie. So
and had promotion. I remember seeing a lot of commercials for it. I think it's pretty disappointing. Yeah. They went back and recast everyone and started over from scratch.
We gotta check the overseas.
8, right?
I think it was also 8.
You never know.
Is what I thought I had read, but. And The Grinch, a little surprised that it did so well, that we went and saw it with the whole family, and it was actually really good.
What is up with you going to see movies?
Enough of
this is a show where we don't watch the movies.
Sorry.
We just criticize
I'm going to
them
guess what the movie's
without
about.
viewing them.
They certainly update. Well, and I'm
a little
not
bit of a retelling, isn't it?
I'm
Don't
not
they
a
change it a little
fan of. I don't particularly care for I'm actually not a big Dr. Seuss fan. Period. I know that's sacrilege, but
Yes.
and the Grinch story was, and it was funny because my daughter's not a big movie fan altogether, but loves the Grinch television special. And I'm like, of all the things that are kind of, you don't want to see any of the happy stuff or whatever, and this is kind of a dark story, and then turns obviously light at the end. They modernized this telling of it. Of course, Benedict Cumberbatch is the Grinch, but they added some characters that are kind of humorous. They really kind of played on the story, and I don't know. It was actually very entertaining.
For the previews, tell me if I'm wrong. It seems like it starts before the Grinch used to start. Like it seems like it's
Which one?
the TV one, the one that everyone has seen. Like I know the story itself. Like I know there's more to it, but the famous TV Christmas special starts with him like gets an idea the day before and like let's just go. I'm gonna ruin Christmas.
One night.
Well, and there's flashbacks in it to when he was a kid. and
Yeah,
stuff
so
like
there
that
seems to
in
be
the-
more to this than what most people have seen.
Yeah, it talks about his motivation behind why he hates Christmas and stuff like that. But there's just my daughter laughed basically through the entire movie, which is not what you would expect necessarily from the Grinch. I mean, there's a lot of humor in it, but it's not necessarily overly jokey. It's actually surprisingly well done. Like I said, I know it's holiday time, stuff like that. I didn't really expect necessarily
Well,
that
no,
there'd
the
be a
kids
big.
movie. What are they going to go see? Nobody wants to see
Overlord.
The Nutcracker, apparently. I mean, the Nutcracker doesn't seem to be really
Well,
like
I know I saw a kid and his dad going into Venom when we were waiting to go see. So that was,
Yes.
it's
always
which,
that.
Which, by the way,
The end of Logan.
Venom
Oh,
opened.
my child.
Venom opened in China this
Yes.
past weekend. Made 111. I wrote $111, but it was
I saw
111
that.
$111
Rough
million
start.
dollars
Oh, million. Okay.
in China. And again, we've got what we were talking about before with Marvel and this kind of, very family-friendly kind of environment. And then you have these runaway successes like Deadpool and Venom as well that are just very gritty, dark,
Was Venom R or is it PG-13?
It's PG-13.
Okay.
But they.
It's definitely on the. It's supposed to be. I mean, I think their intention is to be on the grittier side.
Yeah.
Of the superhero, the anti-hero.
Right.
And
Venom's going to make over $700 million at the box office worldwide. I mean, I went down the list. $700 million doesn't rank as high as you think it would worldwide, but it's still $700 million.
So has Venom 2 been announced already, or is it?
I mean,
bring in Carnage. Let's
Yes.
wreck this franchise yet.
come on, yeah, why not?
There's like 3 or 4 Venom characters, right?
What do you mean?
Carnage and then like
Oh.
Anti-Venom.
Oh yeah, I can't even keep
Carnage
straight.
Venom and Venom Carnage and
Venom made $34.7 million on Friday in China.
it's a good day.
That's more than any other movie made the entire weekend.
Except the Grinch.
Yes, except for the Grinch. And I guess it's a movie that's obviously playing well overseas. I mean, it is. It's amazing. Some
good day.
Stuff is very, very
It's a good
international. I did also see Bohemian Rhapsody. You had reviewed it last week.
What'd you think?
I have a half-hour tirade I could go on.
Oh.
So
Now remember, this is the same guy who loves all the prequels, right?
well, not all of them. Attack of the Clones is terrible.
Okay.
I will admit.
Phantom Menace, though. You like Phantom
Menace is better
You like
upon
Phantom
fifth
Menace.
or sixth viewing.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I love
Just
Revenge
that
of the Sith.
prequel. Go Bohemian Rhapsody.
So you're trying to undercut my authority.
Yes, I absolutely am undercutting your authority.
Bad enough I don't see any of these movies we talk about.
Yes.
Now
I've seen it and I want to pan it.
Go.
No,
Man.
it's okay. So I'm a huge fan of the band.
Right. Way bigger
pretty much
than
my entire life, outside of a very small window, like late middle school, early high school, I moved on to other bands and then I came back to them into high school, and then Freddie actually died and when I was in high school, and then of course Wayne's World came out. The U.S. suddenly re-recognized the band and stuff like that, and one of the few bands where I've read. I don't know, 30, 40, 50 biographies on. So the story of the band, which is very interesting, is, I know most of it, and most of it, you've heard it in enough different stories to say, okay, this has got to be actual as opposed to one person's viewpoint. And I was, but I'm going into it also saying, I understand this is a biopic. Mm-hmm. They're going to play with the facts a little bit. What amazes me, though, about stuff like this is they get the most minute details correct with wardrobe and with mannerisms and with they had the pizza oven, the famous lighting grid that Queen used on the jazz tour that's on the Live Killers album. It's like a 400 light. I mean, it was the biggest lighting grid of its time, and that's like intricately recreated. And then with the story, they're just kind of like, we'll just kind of not really tell the story in the order that any of it happened, and we're just going to kind of not really tell the story the way much of it is not even close to being accurate. And again, I'm going, okay, it's biopic. In the first 15 minutes, I watch the formation of the band, and I go, well,
relationship with his family too.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, he wasn't living with his family. He didn't meet the band that way. He didn't join the band that way. He didn't meet Mary that way. John Deacon wasn't in the band originally, and he didn't lose his mic stand in the first Queen show. And I'm like, okay, so they've kind of, he was already a singer in another band. He was best friends with Tim Staffel, the guy who left Queen. That's another thing, talking about, they had Tim Staffel, the original singer of Smile, come back and re-record the vocal and the bass track so that the Smile version sounded more like the actual version than the Freddie version. And I'm like, this is the detail we're paying attention to. But then the story of the band, Freddie was in another band. He was best buds with Tim. He lived with Brian and Roger in an apartment. He wasn't living with his parents. He already knew them. Brian was dating Mary, and then Freddie said, hey, are you serious? And he's like, and then he started dating, he lost his mic stand famously with the first band he was with. And then John Deacon was, the third or fourth bassist that the band had. So I'm like, okay, all right, we're kind of Hollywoodized in the beginning. And I get it.
We got to go fast.
But then they go on the first American tour, which they really, the first tour they were, and I'm like, oh, cool, they're going to show. They opened for Mott the Hoople, first American tour. Brian got really sick. He thought he was going to lose his arm. He gets stuck in a hospital bed. He writes, now I'm here. Now, none of that happened. Instead, they're playing Fat Bottom Girls, which came out 5 years later.
Yes. Totally not at all.
And then I'm like, oh, well then, I'm sorry, I'm going to spoil the entire movie for anyone that hasn't seen it yet.
What? Freddie Mercury lives, right?
And then suddenly We Will Rock You happens way late in the movie. It appears as if it happens in the 80s when it happened in the late 70s. Paul Prenter, his personal manager, doesn't get fired because they didn't tell him about Live Aid. He gets fired a year after Live Aid. Jim Hutton is not a servant at a party. He's a hairdresser he meets at a club, and they start dating. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, well, so then I say, Pat's Formation. I'm like, the first album was created in a very unique way. They had signed this terrible management deal, but this new studio was opening up. Brian was fans with the engineer, or buddies with the engineer. He said, you can come in between midnight and 6 when none of the paying customers are here, beat on the instruments and the microphones, stuff like that, so we can test everything out. And while you're doing that, we'll allow you to record those demos. Well, no, they have them selling the van.
Yeah, to get money.
And then Mike Myers' character appears, and I'm like, who is this even based on? It's a complete fabrication. And EMI was very, very supportive of the band. John Reed, their manager, was never fired. He was, in the movie, he gets thrown out of the limo. Paul sets him up, throws him out of the limo, and I'm like, well, in reality, he happened to be Elton John's manager, and they came to an agreement saying, you can't manage both of us. Why don't you go manage Elton, and we'll take our lawyer Jim Beach, and he can become our manager. So all that was happening, and then I'm like, okay, well, the music's great. They're playing the stuff, even though the songs are all completely out of sequence, which is fine.
Dramatic.
And I'm like, okay, we're gonna get to Live Aid, which is the basis of this, this whole movie. And I'm like, but then they come up with this whole story of that the band broke up, which didn't happen. They had it seem like Another One Bites the Dust came out with Hot Space when it came out with the game, and that helped break up the band. When the band didn't break up, they had the Hot Space came out. They went on tour. They said, let's take a year off. All of us will do solo albums. But instead, they made it seem like Freddie was the only one doing a solo album, and the band hated him for it and were jealous of him. And I think I said I was concerned about Brian and Roger being involved and sanitizing their characters. And I thought it was funny that they're showing Freddie as this party animal, and Brian and Roger are like, we have to get back to our wives. Like, that's not at all.
Oops.
And they made John goofy because he wasn't involved in the story. But when it comes back around to Live Aid, and they make it seem as if Freddie knew he had AIDS. He didn't know till 2 years after Live Aid, and they, the whole big story of why Live Aid was so important to Queen was because they considered a fatal error in judgment by playing in Africa in '84. Oh, that was the other thing too. Before Live Aid, they had released a new album. They went on tour for like 6 months. They were well-oiled machine, and then there was like a month before Live Aid happened. So it's not like they got back together, Freddie couldn't sing and all this kind of stuff. But the big reason why Live Aid was big to them was they played in Africa when the rest of the world said, do not play in Africa while apartheid is going on. They played Sun City. They got blacklisted. They were hated across the world for it. And this was, the real gist of why it was such a big deal that they came back to Live Aid.
Well, it's also sanitizing their reputation,
But
we're not as bad as...
And, despite all that, I was like, okay, I get it. It's Hollywoodized. It was a fun movie. It was very enjoyable. The music's great. The acting's fantastic. Especially from the Freddie John characters. The Freddie Brian characters. The Roger John ones were a little...
Really? I did not like the Brian one at all.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I felt like he was spot on as far as the...
Right. As far as the
sound and
as far as the look of him, but I was underwhelmed by him as an individual, maybe because Brian isn't as cinematic as everybody else. Like you'd expect this awesome guitar player to be very bombastic or in command of a room, and he was just, nope, I'm going to play serious. This is... Yeah.
And so my only real big complaint outside of all those...
outside of the
fictionalization, I get it, is... that these guys spent 8 years building this up, and they knew this was the legacy of the band. That most people are going to walk out of there and go, I now understand the story of Queen. And the story of Queen is so interesting and what really happened. It just seems weird to fictionalize it. And I know you're compressing 15 years into 2 hours, but I was surprised that I struggled so much. And I know it's only people who really, if you go in and just know the song, stuff like that, you're going to love the movie.
Sure.
So that's the review for most people. You're going to love the movie, but if you kind of know the story, and for whatever reason you just can't get past some of these details, it just makes it more difficult than I expected it to be. I thought I could just put it aside and go, this is just going to be a fun.
Well, I think you love Queen. I mean,
Sure.
it's-
So that was my very long review of, but that doesn't matter because
I'm gonna love it.
yeah,
I don't know any of these details.
It is
Yep.
a great,
Love
it
it.
is a fun movie, but it doesn't matter because we have something else on the horizon. If we could go full screen, it'd be even better. Detective Pikachu. The trailer debuted. Of course, Ryan Reynolds is the voice of Pikachu.
Did you watch this?
No.
So
I watched it.
He's a detective that's gonna solve crimes and take care of business. I don't know what to make of this.
I don't get it at all.
At
Like, where
first,
is it coming from?
At first, I'm like, okay, Ryan Reynolds. Maybe he's kind of created this trailer. Like, I knew there was talk about a Pikachu movie coming out. I didn't realize it was going to be live action mixed with CG.
I did laugh as I watched it. Ryan Reynolds is good as Pikachu. I mean, as a slightly.
I don't know what to make of it. What?
I'm watching it for the first time.
Okay, well,
and-
I'm sorry. Wait,
Well, you have to watch with
Yeah.
with the actual dialogue
But
and stuff of what's going on. It's. I mean, I'm not a huge Pokemon fan. I have played Pokemon Go. My daughter semi likes Pokemon. This semi seems interesting to me. I mean, I laughed. I mean, Ryan Reynolds is pretty good at almost anything he does.
Good call casting Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a great scene at the end. You have to watch it with Mr. Mime. Did you watch this, Boni, with the
Yes.
volume? The scene at the end with Mr. Mime is unbelievable.
All right, we're almost out of time, so I do have to throw out a
again.
few other quick stories. Child's Play remake
You don't
and
need
poster has come out. There was a story at Screen Rant, maybe we'll get to next week. There was a headline I thought I'd never see: how the new Super Mario Brothers movie can actually be good.
Just don't be like the other one.
Don't make it. Yeah.
And
I still love that Dennis Hopper quote. Sometimes you just got to get paid.
Hey,
CBS released its holiday schedule for TV.
it's tough to read that article.
So sorry, there was a
Can
lot of
someone-
stuff
Can
going
someone read that and put it into like an Excel spreadsheet with less information?
which maybe we'll go over next week. And also next week we can talk about they released the holiday movie guide, the blockbusters, award contenders, and more that you'll want to see in theaters.
Yes.
Hopefully we'll all see. Or maybe not see, I don't know. We'll
I have my tickets all ready for Saturday to see Harry Potter.
nice.
actually.
I was going to say, so we
Fantastic
have
Beasts.
Fantastic
Fantastic
Beasts,
Beasts.
Instant Family, and Widows, which is getting a lot of play.
Understand.
A lot
We are
of
going to go see
interesting.
Grindelwald Saturday.
Awesome. So we'll get expected
The
review
Crimes of. I've heard it's
next
terrible.
week. Okay.
Yes.
Have on this edition of Inside Media Weekly. Thanks for joining us.